Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Robots Are Coming. And today we will be interviewing Kathy Timpte, former professor and New Testament scholar specializing in Markan studies. I'm Ken Hin, your host with The Robots Are Coming. Let's get started.
Thanks for that introduction, Ken, and it's so good to be with you. Before we start, I'm guessing some of you may not have really a good idea of what New Testament or Markan Studies is. So let me give you a quick rundown. So the Christian canon is broke into two major sections, the Old Testament and the New Testament. While the Old Testament is the story of the Jewish people and is pretty similar to the Jewish Tanakh, the New Testament is the specifically Christian portion of the Bible and covers the life of Jesus in the Gospels. So that's where Jesus's life comes in. And then what happens after Jesus dies, what do his followers do, and has some letters there. Markan studies, then Mark is one of the four gospels, one of the four stories of the life and death and resurrection of Jesus. And Mark is the shortest and presumably the earliest of these. And so this is what I study. I've been a full-time professor at St. Mary's, and most recently now I'm the director of university and young adult ministries at a local Presbyterian church. So I've both been a professor and educator of the Bible on a formal level, and then on a more casual and informal level now in the church.
Awesome. So you're currently serving at the First Presbyterian Church of Berkeley. And as you just mentioned, you're a huge part of the effort to expand Bible studies to youth, college students, and beyond, really provoking timely discussions and interpretations of the text. And as someone who is an expert at the Bible, particularly in the New Testament, how did God intend for humans to use technology in the Bible?
Yeah, so this is such a fun and interesting question, Ken. And I'll begin by saying that it's really, really important to know that the Christian Bible, both Old and New Testaments, are very specifically theological books. When I say theological, this is what I mean. So some parts of both the New Testament and the Old Testament read a little bit like history. Jesus went to Galilee and he talked to these people. This king of Israel lived for 40 years and lived and died, right? So there are portions that feel a little bit like history, but fundamentally, the Bible is concerned with showing that God is at the center of the universe and cares that humanity can connect with the divine. So even when it reads like history, really the main influence is going to be how do we connect with God? How do we understand who God is? So, when it comes to technology, you get really interestingly different stories. On the one hand, you often will get stories where God loves technology, and technology is shown to be from God and to be very, very good. So you'll get the story of Noah and the ark, where Noah is instructed by God very specifically how to build this enormous boat to house all these animals. You'll get God giving specific instructions on crop rotation in some of the Jewish law pieces. You'll get in Adam and Eve in the garden, God showing Adam and Eve how to cultivate the earth that God has created. And in all those cases, technology is seen to be from God and good unambiguously. But on the other hand, you get all these other stories where technology is clearly modeled as evil. So you get a story in the book of Genesis in the Old Testament about humans wanting to build a tower that reaches the heavens so they can be like God. And God will come down and look at this technology in process and consider it to be utterly evil because they're trying to replace or take on God in a confrontational sort of way. And so God creates languages so that they can no longer work together and build this tower. You'll also get these really interesting stories about several different nations who have chariots, one of the primary forms of technology that really elevates people groups in the ancient world above each other when they have these chariots. And you'll see they are trying to oppress God's people with the chariots. And so God will utterly destroy these people groups and the chariots. And again, this is supposed to be a sign that no technology can take on God. God is going to be able to defeat any and all technology. So you get both good and bad, right? And the fundamental through line here in the Bible is always and specifically that when technology is used to honor God and to promote God's justice to God's people, technology is a good thing. When technology is used to harm God's people or to try to take on God or replace God, then technology is an evil.
And as technology becomes more and more complex, Kathy, it is really critical to consider its moral and ethical implications. We've seen technology like artificial intelligence systems used to track people like the Uyghurs in China. And on the other hand, in America, we've seen the power of big technology companies to influence what our smartphones can say. Well, technology influences and changes us over time. It is a tool that God has given us to use in ways that honor Him and help us love our neighbors in Matthew 22:37 to 39. Is technology therefore morally neutral, Kathy?
Yeah, I think that's a really accurate and good way to talk about technology. That it's neutral, right? So again, what the Bible is going to say is that God seems to approve of technology when it's either given by God directly or when it's used to help the oppressed and needy. When, on the other hand, it's used to replace God or oppress others, then watch out, because the Bible is committed to saying that the God is the most important force there is. So there are a lot of stories that show the futility of trying to use technology to stand against God. So again, like this is where it's really, really important to see the Bible as the theological book, right? It has a very clear purpose, and so technology is going to always be subservient to that purpose to show who God is.
And what did God intend our technology to be and the ability to create tools to live out our commandments?
Yeah, right. Again, this is just such a great question, Ken. So several of the Gospels have Jesus, who's in conversation with the Jewish leaders of the day, talking about what is the most important commandment, what are the most important ways that we live our lives. And both the Jewish leader and Jesus in these stories will agree that the most important commandment is to love God with your whole self, right? Heart and mind and strength, that your physical, your mental, your soul, all of these things. And then the second most important commandment is to love others, and to love others as much as you love yourself. So the Jewish law is this beautiful, intricate, detailed, cohesive whole that will include pieces that modern Americans will understand and recognize as laws, similar to what we have, in America, right? Don't steal, don't murder, this sort of thing. But the Jewish law also has all sorts of laws that we as Americans have a harder time understanding to be legal laws, according to our judicial system. So some of the laws of the Jewish system are how to plant fields, or what to wear, or what foods you can eat at the same time or at different times or at all, right? And so there are all these different laws that are harder for us as modern Americans to really understand. Why does that count as a law? Again, the point of the Jewish law is to show that God cares about all aspects of people's lives, and that therefore all things count in some valence of morality, where most secular Americans would consider, lying and cheating and stealing, those are bad, but what I eat on any given Sunday, not a problem, doesn't have to do with morality. The Jewish law also has this really interesting hierarchy, however. So to this day, Jews will often follow kosher, and they'll also follow Sabbath keeping, right, where they don't do work on the Sabbath. But the Jewish law has provisions for if you need to save somebody's life on the Sabbath, even though that counts as work, you are compelled to save that life because that is more important than any specific Sabbath keeping practice. And so you'll see a similar thing with Jesus. Jesus will talk about don't lie, don't even think ill of people in your brains, right? Which seems very legalistic and very persnickety to those of us in America. This doesn't count as legal judicial valence. But again, this is about Jesus showing us that our entire beings are there to worship God. So, once again, if and when technology comes in, right, this is again always going to fall under those two commandments: love God and love others. So, if technology is used to elevate people groups above each other or actively oppress, then technology is going to be against God's designs. But if technology is used to help each other, connect us better, to cultivate the earth more, to care for everyone, then technology is going to be seen as good and fruitful and something to be applauded and excited about.
And as an expert specializing in Markan studies, could you comment a little bit more on what Mark says about whether or not technology corrupts us or helps our youth or people or even adults?
Yeah. So, I mean, again, I'm going to keep harping on technology is neutral, and that the Bible and Mark is specifically about directing yourself in towards the divine. So, in Mark, there's going to be different circumstances where technologies are good or bad. So, in the second chapter of Mark, so really on in Mark, it'll talk about a man who's paralyzed, and his friends find not only a means of carrying him, but a way to lower him down through a roof to enter a room. So in that sense, technology is clearly good. They're caring for their friend. They're figuring out a way to embrace his disability and to stay in a relationship with him. Miracles become a little bit harder. I'm not sure if you'd call a miracle technology, but even if you don't take them as factual, as actually happening historically, they are a way to help people have better lives. So getting more food, or healing a sick person, or things like that. So again, that's where technology is clearly good. One of the famous followers of Paul, so this isn't in Mark, but this is in a different book of the New Testament, is going to use many forms of technology, lamps and boats and roads, to spread what he considers to be the good news of Jesus far and wide. So all of those would be good examples of technology. But in Mark, and I mean really throughout the Bible, there's a strong warning against wealth. That wealth can hinder more than almost anything else, that wealth keeps us oppressed, or makes us feel like we're not connecting to God or don't connect to our neighbors. And so you really have the idea that wealth, and then by extension technology, can be a hindrance to connection. So in Mark, you get a story of a rich man turning away from following Jesus, or a parable, this one is in Luke, where a man wants to build more barns to store his wealth. And so, barn raising would fall under a sort of technology. And this is presented as a poor choice, that he's thinking about the future and his own riches instead of the now and everybody else. So for the everyday average religious person today, what I'd say is this: that the Bible is directly against capitalistic values of increasing personal wealth by competing against and pushing down others. I think that that's pretty clear. But if you're using technology to connect and be kind to others, if you're using technology to help the earth and the oppressed, then I think that this can be considered solidly a gift from God.
Well, that's a great perspective to have, and having a perspective that you can use technology for the greater good and help from your perspective the oppressed and the underprivileged, and that would be a way of using technology to help others and under the name of the Bible. So the next thing I wanted to discuss with you, Kathy, was how we met initially. Was we met through a faith group at Berkeley's First Presbyterian Church through the young adult section. So I wanted to discuss how you see the collaboration between young adults and their faith journeys who are in faith groups with technologists and lawmakers in the future. How do you view that collaboration? Do you think we'll mesh well together? Do you think this collaboration can keep going on? And how do you view our future together?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm always going to be in favor of people making connections and roads, no matter what their backgrounds, in any way, right? Race, sexuality, gender, religion, all of these things. The more that we can connect to each other, the more that we can work together. That's always going to be a good thing, right? So hopefully, I have made clear the connection between Judaism and Christianity, right? Very different religions to this day, but they have so much overlap and so much important understanding of who God is that they share in common. So different faith groups can really find common ground and work together in their care for the earth, in their care for animals and people and each other. And I think all religions and the a-religious, I think at our best, humanity tries to make the world better and tries to connect with each other more. And I think that that's a primary goal of what religious people are going to say and what technologists are going to say. Americans tend to be deeply individualistic, but I don't think that that is necessarily true globally. And I think that religious belief can act as a counter to, especially America's individualistic or individualism flaws, which is the idea that I am primary, that me and my needs should come before everybody else's. That if I have to elbow somebody out of the way to get ahead, that that's an acceptable thing. And I think that instead that we're seeing even on a non-religious level, right? The climate crisis, some of the increased aggressions between ideological different political groups, all of these things like this, we're seeing that the more and more and more we get angry and vicious and fight against each other, the less and less and less the earth is cared for, that the oppressed are cared for, and all of these things. And so I think that, especially the climate crisis, there are clear what's that need to be done. We need to fix our environment. We need to fix the political situation. We need to connect to each other more. And so I think all of those, that technology can function as the how, right? How can we get this done? There are incredible amounts of technological advances that really have ideas of how to solve some of these problems. And then religion can add in the why. Why should we do this? What is the value of doing this? What is the value of giving up something of mine, whether it's money or time or my importance? That religion can really work in harmony as the why to technology's how. So I really think that the future of collaboration between the church and technology would be to provide some moral and ethical groundings for technological and judicial laws.
Yeah, and I definitely look forward to having more of a collaboration between the church and technology to provide some moral and ethical grounding that would provide the why um, for our future. And I just want to thank you again for having this wonderful conversation with me, Kathy.
Yeah, I'm so happy to have stopped by, and thank you for asking me, Ken. This was really a pleasure.
But yeah, and thank you everyone for listening to this episode of The Robots Are Coming. And next time we'll have more professors, more great, awesome people like Kathy speaking on the topics of startups, law, policy, and entrepreneurship. So make sure you subscribe. The Robots Are Coming wherever you're listening to, and tell all of your friends to do that as well. So thank you everyone for listening.